Hello friends, and welcome to Gardening with Creekside. Today we are going to talk about how to design a successful and beautiful container. It is January, right? It is cold, it is chilly. We actually have some snow on the ground here in North Carolina, but it is never too soon, never too early to go ahead and start dreaming and planning for your spring, summer garden. So that is what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to give you my tips on how to design a successful container, and then at the end I'm going to give you some tips on practical, what do you need to do, container size, soil, fertilizer, water, all of those kinds of things. Now, what I'm going to tell you, what I am going to share with you on these design tips, these are guidelines, right? There are no hard, fast rules in gardening. There is grace in gardening. Remember, it is your garden. You get to do what you want to do in your garden. If you love an arrangement in a container and it goes against the horticultural norms, the designer tips, then don't worry about it. It is your garden. I want you to enjoy it, okay? That is a tip number one. Now, basically, let's get into some design ideas for containers. One, I'm going to give you some different ideas. One of the general rules in designing a container, I know you've probably heard it before, is that recipe of that thriller, filler, and spiller. So if you don't know where to begin and you find yourself at the garden center or you're online looking at plants and you're like, well, I have this container, but I have no clue what to put in it. The thriller, filler, spiller combo is a great place to start. And you can filter on our website by those different kind of specifications. So let's walk it through. A thriller is going to be something that's going to be your tallest thing. It thrills you. It brings you in. So some great options for this would be like a coleus, a grass that gives you some height. It could be a beautiful cleome. Really anything that is your tallest plant in your container. And it's all subjective, my friends. We had the very large aquapots in front of our pergola, and these were huge self-watering containers. So I could go big. I put a vertigo grass in it. Now that is massive and that is huge. That was my thriller. In some containers that I have that are much smaller, maybe it is a begonia, something a little bit shorter. So just keep in mind it's all relative to the size of your container and the size, the scale of where you're going to put it in your garden. So thriller, tall, really fun interest. Now filler, as you might imagine, is going to be that medium height. This is what's going to give you your bulk around the base of your thriller. Some great options for your fillers would be like euphorbia, whether it's diamond snow euphorbia to give you a nice big block of white. If you want to go light and airy, then diamond frost would be a great option for you on like a filler, right? So that is going to give you your bulk around it. Then we have our spiller. Spillers, of course, are going to spill over the container and they're going to trail down. So depending on your container, my sweet friends, this could be a massive number of different types of plants. One of my favorite ones has 0 flowers on it, but it is very striking, is Dichondra Silver Falls. Dichondra Silver Falls has, like I said, 0 flowers on it, but it has these beautiful silver, almost has like a little metallic sheen to it, very small leaves on it that does nothing, has very little height, but man, it trails. It is gorgeous in containers and hanging baskets. So you can do that. Of course, any of your super bells, they're going to give you a little bit of height and spill over. Same thing with your super petunias. They're going to fill in and spill over. Gorgeous ideas with your thrillers. You could even use like a Mojave portulaca. Mojave portulacas work great as ground covers in the landscape, but in containers, you put them right there on the edge of the container and they will spill over and give you beautiful flowers and interest. Of course, sweet potato vine. That is like one of the #1 spillers that will absolutely kind of go for it and just take over and just spill out of your container. So we're looking at those different options of that thriller, filler, and spiller. It does not matter if it's going to be a sun container or a shade container. There are going to be plants that will fit into those categories. Let's say you want to do a shade container, because I think sometimes the sun containers and the sun garden gets all the attention. So let's talk about shade. You could use one of your color blaze coleuses, because the color blaze coleus can do sun or shade. It is fabulous. One of the great ones maybe that you want to try this year, maybe you're like, well, Jenny, you know, in a container, the color blaze coleus, it just gets way too big and it's too aggressive, and I just, you know, it's just too much. All right, I want you to think about the mini-me's. There are 2 mini-me color blaze coleuses that Proven Winners has introduced into the market in the last 2 or 3 years. The first one was Mini-Me Watermelon, which is going to give you a really fun red, right? Think of all the colors of a watermelon. That is what this coleus does. One of my all-time favorite new plants that is coming out this year is the Mini-Me Chartreuse. This is going to be nothing but bright chartreuse color on it. Very petite, very stocky. You're not going to have to prune it. That would be a great thriller for a shade container. You got a hosta, right? You've got a hosta that you love and you want to put in a container. That would be an amazing filler. So you could put the coleus in there. You could put the hosta in there. Another great filler for a shade container is Endless Illumination Broalia. All-time favorite shade annuals that's going to give you loads of color. It's going to have that nice mounded habit to it. So if you wanted to, a stunning container just alone would be that Chartreuse Mini-Me. Then you could do a hosta of your choice. Put in that Endless Illumination Broalia. Beautiful. You could just leave it like that. Remember how I said there are no hard, fast rules in gardening? You could have a thriller and 2 fillers and no spiller. I know, it's shocking. One of my favorite things to do on our back patio is because we have 2 of the Weston urns from Unique Stone. And I love to see the actual container. I don't want to hide my container. I want to see that. So many times when I'm planting those Weston urns, I will just simply do a thriller. Right now, I just have a gold arborvitae in there, and that is it. So you can just do a thriller if you want. But in the springtime, I like to add a little pop of color. So I will put in one of my favorite combinations that I did in those Western urns was I added the osteospermums. That was the Horizon Sunset. Y'all, they were gorgeous. So I had a thriller and I had fillers and no spillers because I don't want to hide my container. In the summertime, fast forward, one of my favorite pictures of that I was able to capture of this gorgeous sunset from the back patio. And you could really see in those 2 containers, I had a grass. I believe it was the skyrocket grass. So more of a green grass with the plumes. And then it has diamond frost around it. Very simple, y'all. You do not have to make your containers complex. You certainly can if you want to, but they don't have to be. You can just have that thriller and that filler in there. Now, so you've got the thriller, filler, spiller combo that you can recipe that you can follow if you like. Or you can even choose to do what we call a monoculture container. So mono meaning one, culture the plant, right? So this is where you're going to pick one plant and you're going to plant it in the container. Now you may have one of that plant or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Depends on how large your container is. So that monoculture, why we do monocultures, why I love monocultures, I do this all the time, is because it brings a really big impact to an area. It really showcases that plant in all of her glory. And if you are just, sometimes you get to the garden center and it is very overwhelming. I get it. There are so many plants and trying to make a decision and put those combos together can be very overwhelming. I don't want it to be, right? Keep it simple, sweetie. So I have done monocultures of coleuses. Pick a coleus, put 2 or 3, however many your container will allow. plant them, and they will grow and look like one massive plant in that container. Early on in our journey here, where we started with Proven Winners, it was not too long after they introduced their Sunstar Pentas, and I got I think it was a rose color, so like a hot pink, and I planted one Penta in a cobalt blue pot. Y'all, that I still remember that plant and that container, and that was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was gorgeous. It was simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it made a huge impact, and that plant was able to shine on its own. You really and truly can pick any plant and use it as a monoculture. I have done surefire begonias. Beautiful. Pick your favorite. Slap it in there. You want to do a super bells. Again, one of my favorites early on, I will never forget this, was a dreamsicle super bells. Again, in a cobalt blue pot. Can you tell that I like the cobalt blue pots? Put that in there, and it was the most beautiful mounded, had it with that Clemson orange against that cobalt blue. Gorgeous. You can choose petunias, right? We all know and love probably Super Petunia Vista bubblegum. It is like, in my opinion, the classic industry standard of a petunia. They're vigorous, so you're going to have to make sure you've got plenty of room for those roots to grow. Slap one Vista bubblegum in that container, and you're going to have a beautiful display in that container, right? So we love those. And then, so you can do those thriller filler spillers. You can do a mono. You can do a combination of a filler and a spiller. Any kind of combination you want to do, you can come up with it. So also, probably should have said this at the beginning, what constitutes a container? A container basically is anything that's not the landscape. So a container could be a hanging basket, it could be a pot, it could be a hay rack, it could be those unconventional containers that we use. If you know me, I love using those unconventional containers. So I have used an old Weber grill as a container. One of the more famous ones here at Creekside is an old wheelbarrow that was no longer functional. And I said, well, heck, it'll make a great container. It'll hold plenty of soil. So we have this wheelbarrow by the bridge that goes over to the pines. And I have the most fun designing that container every year. Historically, I always kind of stick with the thriller, filler, and spiller combo in that wheelbarrow because it just works for it. It gives me some height. I need some height in that area. So think outside the box. Of course, we also have an old refrigerator here that we've laid down. We have a hosta growing in it. And so it is beautiful. It is different. It is unique. I also have some old patio chairs. These were like wrought iron patio chairs. I cut out the bottom. I found a pot that would fit and rest against the frame of where the seat is. And I use that as a container. So you can think of fun, unique, different ways to put a container together. It all depends on your gardening style. So you can use whatever you want. Remember, this is your garden. It should bring you joy. It should bring a smile to your face, and maybe even a little chuckle to you when you look at that. So just have fun in the garden. Start thinking outside the box. What are some different things maybe that you have laying around that are headed to the dump, or you're going to head and give away? Maybe they'll turn out and be a great container. If it holds soil, it'll be a great container for sure. All right, some tips on how to not only design those beautiful containers, but also like practical. What do you need to do? This is what I always tell people when you're doing a container. I want you to choose the largest container that will fit your space. It's all about scale, my friends, right? We're talking about at the pergola, we had the huge, giant aqua pots, right? Because that is a very large space, so I need a large large container to fill that space. However, I have other areas around my house, in the garden, that are nice and tight and intimate, so I need a smaller container. So it's going to completely depend on where you're putting this container. Think about scale. You don't want to have a big, huge, wide open space and have a little small container. It's going to get lost. It's going to look dinky. It is not going to look good. Nobody's going to notice it. On the other hand, you don't want to put a too large of a container in a small confined space. It'll start to feel too crowded. Play with it. That's the beautiful thing about containers. You can move them. So you can put it in one spot, and if it just doesn't seem to work, you just kind of look at it and you're like, I just don't know that I like that. You can move it. So pick the biggest container that your space will allow. Number 2, get some great quality potting soil. Before we know it, especially here in the South, I'm going to see commercials all over TV. I'm going to hear it on the radio and everything. The big box stores are going to say, we have potting soil, 5 bags for $10. Y'all, please don't do that. That means that's a $2 bag of potting soil. You're going to get what you pay for. It's going to be junk. Your plants are not going to thrive. Think of your soil as the diet for your plants. This is where your plants are getting their food from. And if this is junk, if it holds way too much water, if it doesn't hold enough water, if there's no nutrients in there, your plants are going to struggle. If you're like, well, Jenny, I don't know what kind of potting soil to use. I hear you. I get you. I personally only use the Proven Winners potting soil. I have tried other brands. They just simply don't work as well, in my opinion, in my garden. I love the Proven Winners potting soil. We have it for sale here at the nursery. So my local people, you can get that. However, if you are in another part of the country and you can't find Proven Winners, this is what I suggest you do. 1, visit your local garden center. Talk to them. What potting soil do they recommend for containers? Go off of their recommendations, because they're going to be the experts in your region. 2, I can hear you right now. I don't have a good local garden center. All I have is this big box store, and the employees, they just don't know anything. What do I do? All right. So I want you to do an experiment. Buy several different brands, several different types of potting soil, make up some containers, and see how they do. This will probably take you a season to do this, right? Because you want to see how does it perform throughout the season. Once you figure out what is the best performing potting soil in your region that you have access to, then there you go. We want to go with that. 2, you're going to have to feed your plants, my friends, because in containers, they do not have as much access as to the water and the nutrients as if they were in the soil, right? In the landscape. So what we want to do is we always use Biotone. Biotone is that great starter fertilizer for your root growth. If you have happy roots, you have happy shoots. So we always use Biotone, whether it's an annual, perennial, shrub, tree, it doesn't matter. If I'm planting something, I use Biotone. It has made a huge difference in how our plants perform. If you're doing a perennial arrangement, right, and you're going to leave those perennials in your container for more than a season, you're going to want to feed that. So a nice slow release fertilizer. Any of your tones, as a general rule, Plant Tone is that Swiss Army knife. It'll take care of just about everything, and it'll be great. So if it's in a container, I would say you're probably going to want to feed it like twice a year. So once coming out of winter, going into spring, when the plants start to wake up, give it a nice little dose. And then halfway through your growing season, 6 to 8 weeks later, let's feed it again. Why do we need to feed containers more than we do in the landscape? It's because you're having to water it constantly, right? It's raining constantly, whatever it may be. Those nutrients leach out. They escape out of the container. Where in the landscape, they're nice and contained, and those roots can go and they can grab hold of it. Containers are going to behave differently than your landscape. If you have annuals, if you have an arrangement with annuals in it, then we're going to slightly change how we fertilize. What I still use my biotone, right? Because that's for my root growth. And then I go ahead and add a little bit of the Proven Winners time release fertilizer in that. Those are those granulars. As Mimi calls it, it's the shake and bake, right? It's in a little container. You shake it and it rattles. Sprinkle that in there. This is going to last you up to 6 months. For me, with all the rain that we get, roughly about 3 months. This is a slow release of fertilizer. It is controlled by temperature. Temperatures go up, it releases more food, okay? So we start with that. You may need to reapply it midway through your season. Then there is the Proven Winners, the liquid, the water-soluble fertilizer. Y'all, this is that instant shot of food that is going to bring a huge impact to those flowering annuals. We only use the Proven Winners fertilizer on your annuals, not your shrubs and not your perennials, just your annuals. That liquid fertilizer you could do once a week, 10 days, 14 days, honestly, whenever you remember it, whenever you have time, do it, okay? This is going to instantly bring nice dark green richness to your plant because it's got that chelated iron in there. It is going to increase your flowers. It is going to make a nice, tight, compact, happy plant. And a happy plant and strong, happy, healthy plant is able to ward off diseases, fungus, root rot, those kinds of things a lot easier. So feeding your plants on a regular basis is going to give you a much happier plant that is producing and living up to its maximum potential. All right, so we've got to feed our plants, and then of course water. You got to consistently water your plants in a container. Again, they're not in the landscape. Their roots can only go so far before they hit the side of that container, and they cannot get access to any more water than what either you give it or the Lord gives it through rain. Now, of course, you could go ahead if you're able and you have access and put your container on drip irrigation. Amazing. That is fantastic. I know that's not always practical, right? People don't either have drip irrigation, or it's just not, you have a container in an area where you don't have irrigation. We're in that situation as well. This is where those self-watering containers will be an absolute lifesaver for you. So you could get a traditional aquapot, right? Those are wonderful, beautiful glazed pottery that has, there's no drainage in the bottom, so it holds the water. And so your plants have continuous water source to them. Now you do have to refill the reservoir in the heat of the summer when your plants are nice and big and vigorous. I find I have to fill mine up once a week. In the early season, when the plants are small, it's not as hot, I'm filling it up maybe every 3 weeks, right? You're going to have beautiful, healthy, happy plants. Well, let's say you don't have an aquapot, like that traditional aquapot. This is where those new aquapot inserts, again, game changer. So the inserts are a self-contained system that you can put into any of your existing containers. So as long as it's big enough to hold that insert, you can then take a traditional pot that you already have on hand and take that aquapot insert, put it in there, and you have turned it into a self-watering container. I'm going to admit I was a little skeptical at first because I was such a huge fan of the traditional aquapots. Y'all, they work great. I have a container of just perennials up at the chicken coop. We're going on, I think, month 18. So we've gone more than a year. We're at like month 18, going on to 2 years with that container having that insert in there. Plants are gorgeous and happy and huge. There's a hosta, there's a fern, there's a euchera. Does beautiful. Do I have to worry about it in the wintertime? For me, North Carolina, zone 8A, I do not, because it drains well. My container is rated to be out year round. And so I can leave all of it intact together outside for year round. So that consistent water. If you don't have any of that, you're just going to have to hand water, my friends. And that's why we love in North Carolina, because our growing season is so long. We love those self-watering options. Otherwise, on certain containers, I could have to water it twice a day in the heat of the summer. And who has time or energy or the memory to do that? I certainly don't. And then the plants show that. So consistent water. So those are some tips for you on how to create a gorgeous, successful container. Remember, enjoy the process. I would also really encourage you, I know that it was a huge help for me when I was beginning my gardening journey, when I'm trying to figure things out, and I still do it to this day. I will have either myself, and I know I want to use this plant, whatever this plant is, okay, especially your annuals. I want to use the new Tiara Pink, Super Tunia, okay? What would be a good pairing with that? And I think, and I'm like, well, I just don't know. So I go to the Proven Winners website, provenwinners.com, and you can find that plant. So you would put in Super Tunia Tiara Pink, and it's going to bring you up to that page. Scroll to the bottom for me, and down there at the bottom, it'll say recipes. Click on that. Depending on the plant will depend on the number of recipes that they have. And they will share with you pairings and the size of the container, how many plants you need, where to put them in the container as far as the arrangement. It is a huge help for me as far as inspiration of kind of getting ideas of maybe different colors to pair with it, different textures, different heights, just all sorts of fun things, different ways to plant it. So if you're stuck on something and you're just not sure, but you know you want to use plant X, head over to Proven Winners. They will do this for all the annuals. They will have recipes and you can explore and have fun, and it will give you an idea of some combinations maybe that you have not thought of in the past. Have fun with this. Don't stress. Enjoy it. And remember, gardening is a journey. I plant my containers completely differently than what I did when I first began. And that is okay. We all change. We all have fun. And we go through different styles and phases through our life. Same thing with the gardens. As always, we hope you have found this fun, informative, and inspirational. Y'all have an amazing day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends.